I did a podcast with Javier Milei. He has consistently praised Milton Friedman and cited him as one of his inspirations. So, what do you think Milton Friedman would say about what's going on in Argentina and what Javier Milei is trying to do in Argentina?
Yeah, I think he would appreciate it. I mean, I think Milei is much more of an Austrian-inspired thinker, but I think he definitely appreciates Friedman. And on the macro level, Friedman always understood it's really painful to treat inflation, but the more you put it off, the harder it is. So I think he would be trying to get him, as he's doing, to just message that short-term pain, long-term gain. I think he'd be very supportive. I think he'd be thrilled to see also that Milei is very good at explaining these abstract ideas and putting his policies in the framework of the bigger picture. That was really meaningful to Friedman. I don't know how politically persuasive it is overall. Milei is very intense. He doesn't have the same sort of gifts of salesmanship and setting people at ease that, say, someone like Ronald Reagan had. But it seems to be that's what his country was calling for right now. So
Yeah, he is more chainsaw, less like
yeah,
warm blanket.
yeah.
Uh, Javier recollects this line from Milton Friedman. I don't know if this is accurate, but if you strive for equality over freedom, you often get neither. But if you strive for freedom, you often get both. Do you think there's truth to this?
I think on the big picture, definitely. I mean, we've seen focusing too much on equality. It can be because equality is such an alluring word,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead you to downgrade all kinds of other things that are really important. But I really think it depends on how you're defining freedom. I mean, the statement is too big and too broad, right? So, if you're talking about freedom, if by freedom you mean not having to pay taxes if you're successful, I think that can have all kinds of knock-on effects, right? The idea that people are able to prosper when they're educated. Where is education going to come from? How is that going to be paid for and supported? And again, to go back to Knight, if you're generating too much inequality or people are feeling that you're generating too much inequality, sometimes they value that more than they value freedom. And so I think I think there has to be more of a balance. And it's hard to make such global statements. I think you have to break them down into what actually do you mean. But again, Milei is coming from a very different context, a very different country that has seen so much upheaval, so much government intervention, so much inflation, so much political turmoil. He's probably thinking about it differently than Friedman was thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, there probably still is a real threat of hyperinflation. There seems to be a very high level of corruption or the capacity for corruption. So it's a really messy situation. So Javier Milei likes to recollect this great line from Milton Friedman that if you strive for equality over freedom, you often get neither. But if you strive for freedom, you often get both. Do you think there's truth to this?
Yeah, I think in the macro, for sure. I mean, we've seen if you really put equality as your goal, it's such a seductive ideal and people believe in it so much that they can carry out horrible crimes, in the name of equality. But then focusing on freedom, these words are too big. They're so hard to define. And so I think you have to ask sort of like, what is the freedom you're talking about, right? If you're talking about the freedom of ordinary people to be entrepreneurial, to make their own way, to start new things, to continue what they're doing, to keep what they've earned, for sure. I think that can increase the equality overall. If you're talking about lower taxes, if freedom is just a code for lower taxes, there has to be, lower taxes in general, great. But if you're one of the top generators of wealth, there has to be some way to ensure that, say, education, right? People prosper when they're well educated. That's when economies do better. Education is generally state funded, and you need some way to support that and provide for those institutions that structure society that make competition possible. So I think it's just a really broad statement. But again, Milei is coming from a really different context. He's coming from the South American context, from such upheaval, such economic devastation, in pursuit of the goal of equality that I think trying to rebalance with that emphasis on freedom, I definitely see where he's coming from.